everyone's trying to figure out how to do more with less. Everyone's trying to figure out, how this industry evolves in the current marketplace of funding and what's getting funding, and obviously AI. I think we're going to talk about DLSS 5 here in a minute too. But in this kind of new world of AI, I think everyone's trying to figure out where their place is in it, and it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 98 of the Sandbox Space Weekly Podcast, where we talk about all your game dev news. I am Chris, joined as always by Baby Girl, who is in my lap, Pumpkin, who is somewhere over there. Of course, every week we have a special guest. This week's guest is Garrett Davis, director of the ShawneeXP Gaming Accelerator, friend of GDEX, friend of Christopher, and we just got back from GDC a couple days ago. How are you this morning, Garrett?
Pretty good, pretty good. We're also packing our friends from San Francisco, known as Conference Crud. So, you and I are feeling just a hair under the weather, but it's pretty much every GDC.
I apologize in advance. I will be coughing. I'm feeling pretty rough. My throat is sore. And also, the kiddos had their dental appointment, Baby and Pumpkin, on Monday. And they had some teeth extracted. Baby had 5 teeth extracted, and she is hurting. So I didn't get any sleep last night because she couldn't fall asleep because I think she's in pain. So all around the Christopher Volpe household it's a hot mess over here, but we're making it through. Garrett, why don't we start off with the news of the moment? Does that sound good? The news of the hour.
Sounds great.
Okay, so let me pull up our showcase here. GDC Festival of Gaming attendance drops 30% to 20,000 visitors. This is from GameIndustry.biz. Sophie McAvoy, excuse me, the staff writer. This year's GDC Festival of Gaming saw a 30% decline in visitors, resulting in a total of 20,000 attendees. This is, I believe, the official number from GDC. Attendance rose to 28,000 in 2023 and over 30,000 in 2024. That number was maintained last year in 2025, but we saw a big drop down. Hosted more than 700 sessions, 1,100 speakers, of which I was a speaker. So excited to be there. And over 300 exhibitors. We're going to get to that in a second, aren't we, Garrett? This is the first year of a bold new concept for GDC, said the GDC president, Ina Brown. We are thrilled that 20,000 unique attendees representing our global community showed up from over 85 countries and trusted us with this evolution. The energy across the festival was packed sessions to a vibrant show floor and thousands of meetings happening throughout the week. Demonstrates how powerful it is when the industry comes together to learn from one another, build partnerships, and shape what comes next for games. Brown continued, this transformation was built directly from community feedback, and we're excited to continue listening, learning, and evolving the GDC Festival of Gaming as we look ahead to 2027. So we try to be pretty open and productive, but let's start with the main things here. That statement sounded like a very much corporate speak to me. And I think that is one of the issues. First of all, I enjoyed GDC tremendously. I got a lot of work done. We had a lot of meetings. We did a lot of parties. I think part of us has to ask the question, how much of that was like directly, oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry. She sounds pathetic. She's miserable. How much of that was like at GDC proper? And how much of that was just the ancillary Halo things around GDC? So I went to a couple of sessions. I spoke at a couple of sessions. I did some mentoring. But I probably, all in all, went to 5 things at GDC, and I spoke at 4 of them. So take that for what it's worth. I don't know. What were your thoughts just overall before we move on here?
Well, I mean, just to like kind of comment on the raw numbers, right? So like 2024 was one of their biggest kind of years ever, right? Like coming out of COVID, they were hitting records, and I think the last 2 years, last year they say they kind of maintained those numbers, but I think they maintained the amount of people coming, but the show floor felt smaller than 2024. Um, and this year, in general, I mean, the expo floor is clearly smaller, right? Whenever we walked down there, it was only in, Moscone West, didn't go all the way, and stretch the other ones. There were some like major supporters that were there, or that were, absent this year. I mean, like Unity didn't have a booth on the floor, which was wild. Netflix,
Yeah, Unity
Autodesk.
had a bunch of events, parties, and
Yep.
such, but I did not see a presence on the floor. They did have one of the mentor cafes that I sort of snuck my way into as a mentor was sponsored by Unity. So
Oh yeah, and so like Autodesk, I don't know, Dolby, like NetEase, Nexon, like they did not have booths on the floor, but like that's basically the story of GDC, which was the business is happening. It's just happening outside, I think, of the conference itself. How many parties, networking events? It just felt like more than ever was happening kind of around GDC in hotel lobbies, and maybe not in the conference proper. But yeah, I mean, Unity put on some amazing, networking events and parties, that were there. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the story, and I don't know why, that is. I mean, we talked about what's happening in the U.S. right now, kind of driving international folks to not come to GDC, and the cost of it in general. I kind of kept tabs on what our GDC trip just kind of cost this year, just me as we were heading out. I mean, it was over $5,000, right, to like stay for the full week when you get the food, flights, kind of that whole nine. So,
yeah,
when you're talking about indie studios, getting the opportunity to get out there and get in rooms with the right people and do pitch competitions. I mean, our R&D's coming out. That's a huge barrier to entry, I think, for a lot of folks, and at a time where a lot of belts are tightening, it's just
absolutely.
difficult, I think, to get out to GDC. So I think that might have hurt the numbers too.
Absolutely. When you look at, the four big things you need when you travel are your flight, your food, your hotel, and then your event costs, right? So I would not have gone if I didn't have my GDC pass covered because I was a speaker, and I had the hotel because I bunked with Henry, our friend of the show, Henry. But I still paid food. And I remember like we went to Chipotle. It was like almost $20 for I just went to Chipotle yesterday and it was like $11.20 or something like that. So every time you go to eat, you're spending $20. Every coffee is like $8 to $10. Drinks range the gambit from, I mean, what was that last night when we were at the Emperor's
Oh
Lounge?
yeah,
I mean, wasn't that was like
yep,
$30 a drink, right, for an old fashioned,
yep, absolutely,
before tip, right? So it's just the
yep.
cost is insane, and I think this has been a larger part of the industry in general. The same way when we went to Dice, man, you're spending $3,400 on just the pass before you get into your hoteling and food and everything. It's just not reasonable, and I think the question is being asked, and because the focus this year was the Festival of Games, we'll come back to that. The question has to be asked: who is the target market for GDC? Because I think it used to be a combination of people that had been in the industry a long time, game creators, and whatnot. And I searched through the list, and I didn't see a lot of like the usual names of the people you like, a Corey Barlog or a Neil Druckmann or Jonathan Blow was there promoting his game, but I don't think he actually went to the show. I think he was just there doing some promotions because he's got a game coming out. I know Warren Spector was there working on something, but you didn't see like a lot of the. So of course, Hideo Kojima. There was that thing around why he didn't come because I think he was getting a lifetime achievement award. So who is the target audience? And it seemed to me like the target audience was middleware solutions trying to get work, trying to get clients, and small to mid-sized studios trying to get their game published or to get work. So it seemed like
And
became,
AI companies,
yeah,
if you look at the GDC
yeah,
floor, yep,
yeah, AI companies trying to pimp their wares, right?
yep.
So this is a reflection of it's too expensive for most people to go. My opinion here, it's too expensive for most people to go, and the people that are going are trying to find work, and there just isn't work available. I think GDC Festival of Games, if you want to call that the theme, if you want to, compared to PAX pricing, I mean, this is much worse than PAX pricing, but if you wanted to get a theme, I think it would be the industry is in a rough place right now. That was the theme of like every panel, every talk that happened.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. I mean, yeah, all the talks, the panels, even discussions, you know what I mean, we're having, everyone's trying to figure out how to do more with less. Everyone's trying to figure out, how this industry evolves in the current marketplace of, funding and what's getting funding, and obviously AI. I think we're going to talk about, DLSS 5 here in a minute too. But in this kind of new world of AI, I think everyone's trying to figure out, where their place is in it, and it's going to be an interesting conversation going forward. And I think GDC was, again, a big reflection of that, right? Cost a whole lot of money. Even the big sponsors weren't, getting out their checkbooks this year. I think they're, also a little afraid of what's going on. A bit more layoffs, but again, like the energy around GDC, like once we were there, was great. The people that we met with, I think the sentiment from indies and even the folks that work at these bigger studios we were hanging out with seems to be like positive. But again, that was like happening around GDC, not so much on the show floor. I was trying to think, we maybe only had like two meetings inside of GDC proper. Everything else was at the Zola Clubhouse or on the Meet to Match platform. Call out Fedor. That's a awesome thing he's got going on there. But yeah, like I said, I think it was happening all around GDC.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed going. I had a great time. Got to do a lot of business. Got to meet a lot of new people. But it's very noticeable how hard it is right now. So let's talk about this Festival of Gaming real fast. Um, Supposed to be the Festival of Gaming, focusing on games. Uh, it did not feel like a festival to me. It felt like a giant corporate event in which games were kind of shoved into, as a second thought. But I'm curious your impressions.
Yeah, the festival side, I didn't get, like, I don't. This just seemed like all the other GDCs I think I've been to is just the show floor was smaller. Um, it like I don't know what changed from the GDC of yesteryear to like now, as a festival. It didn't seem like there was just kind of general consumers there. Like, it was a big like E3 like trade show where you're just gonna have people there that maybe aren't devs, that aren't in the industry, just coming to enjoy games in general. Everybody was still industry folks. So like, what's the I don't even understand what they were trying to do when it comes to it being a festival of games. Like, how did that switch from what they were doing before? It just seemed like a bit of a rebrand in a bit of a smaller show, with everything going on. I mean, they had like more like kind of seating and places for people to go and chat with each other and meet up, but that was only kind of the main change I think I saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things right off the rip. Trying to have more kind of indie game presence, but even then, they were kind of shoved to the side in place of
Yeah.
these giant middleware AI solutions as soon as you walk in. And then they did have some video game music playing at like the Yerba Buena area, the park, and um, but even like there was a lot of weird stuff. So like the lobby for the expo hall was playing 80s music all weekend long, right? And like I love 80s music as much as the next guy. Like sign me up. I used to do ladies 80s every week at a local bar here in Columbus. But until I was there for the opening reception and the president, Nina, mentioned that GDC was turning 40 and so they were celebrating with 80s music, I had no idea there was a connection between the two.
Yeah.
There nowhere that I saw, was there anything like happy birthday, turning 40, like,
Right.
GDC enters middle age, like there was no comments to that. And my feeling is that you see this a lot where you have these large, like, sort of corporate entities that become kind of entrenched and they start running off inertia. Um, they become they're not sure how to pivot, how to really change. Like they'll do it in a branding sense, but they won't do it in a spirit sense. Like their internal spirit won't change.
Right.
And that's kind of the feeling that I got, is that they wanted to rebrand to be more accessible for indies. It reminds me a little bit, I won't say who it is. It's a local law firm here that we worked with a little bit, who really wanted to get into the startup entrepreneur world. And they were talking about it
Right.
for months and months, and how they were going to be like, the first lawyer, the first point of contact for new startup companies, but they weren't willing to change their hourly billing rate. Right.
Yep.
And they charge $500,000, $800,000 an hour. And it's just like, that is a ridiculous amount of money to charge a startup. I paid like 18 grand for an operating agreement, which is something that can be done for like $2,000, through
Right.
another lawyer. And so it just feels like maybe it's a case of internal, like, hiring bias, where people tend to hire people that are like themselves. And so you've got a more corporate kind of side. And because GDC is a large, very, generally profitable, international or organization company. And so they kind of run like a Silicon Valley company a little bit. And maybe they've just kept hiring people that are more on the business side. I don't know. That's just kind of the vibe that I got from the experience.
Got to be, I mean, it's super difficult to put on a conference of that quality. I think even over the last 40 years, and it's built up to be like such a behemoth. It's difficult to turn. I mean, once you start getting in large organizations that have entrenched folks, and this is how you kind of always done it. I think to kind of do any kind of course correction is really hard. And even if you're gonna try to cater more towards the indie ecosystem, because that's kind of, I think, where the industry's moving in general, you still have to pay the bills for the Moscone Center. You're in downtown San Francisco, so like being able to balance, just indies who, by nature of what they are, typically don't have huge amounts of cash to be able to send their full teams out to San Francisco and get floor space on the GDC Expo Hall. It's got to be difficult to pull something like that off. But like I said, even though there were blemishes for it, I think GDC, like the show itself, still holds a great spot like in the industry. Like I said, the energy like around GDC, and I mean the industry still descended on San Francisco for that whole week. I mean the meetings we had, opportunities that we came up with, I don't think we would have gotten if we weren't there, right?
Sure.
So that was I'm excited to see what they do with it moving forward, right? And particularly, we're not at like a, hopefully, next year we're not at some kind of crazy time in the US as well. Things are more calm, because that's the other issue, is how much did what's happening in the world right now affect attendance, right?
Sure.
For GDC. So it'll be interesting to look at Gamescom's, I think, numbers, and the Tokyo Game Show, and kind of the rest of them, later on the year, to kind of compare. Is it just GDC? Did they have a dip? I didn't actually get to even see the numbers for Dice, although they don't usually publicize those too much either. But yeah, and like I said, I think we had a great week, and GDC is a change in, and we'll see how those changes work out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the stuff that they're trying to do is what GDEX has been working towards for a long time, like being kind of a festival of games. Like we actually use that nomenclature for a little bit. Um, and I would love to see if we could be a place excuse me, that can take advantage of those gaps where, your favorite line, low cost of living area. I can
Hmm.
run, for probably what, Facebook spent for their booth space this year, I could probably run GDEX for 5 years, in its completion. So, and having it be super affordable, I don't know what it costs for a 10 by 10 space, but 10 by 10 space at GDEX is $400 for 4 days, and it's actually $350 now if you go in and get the discounted price. Our hotels are $150 a night. I think you said you were paying like what, $320 a night or something.
Yeah.
So you could be there for 4 days at the cost of 2 days at San Francisco. And obviously the food's going to be better pricing. So I think there is an opportunity to take advantage of what people need, and I think what people need is like a real serious ability to network and make new connections, to showcase what they're working on, but then also to get the knowledge and opportunities to be successful, because it is a rough space and rough time right now. And so anything that can help smooth that out, reduce costs, I think is really valuable. And to your other point, like going out to events is super important. I mean, I got a whole bag of people we just met, right? Like their business cards and stuff, who we never would have met if we stayed in Ohio. And you never know what those folks are going to be able to assist you with, or what opportunities they might bring to you in the future.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were just talking, before the show with, our studios coming out of the accelerator program. I mean, just at GDC, last week, meeting with, over 30 publishers. I mean, they're moving on to, evals for like 26 publishers. And that was all business done, during GDC week that they wouldn't have gotten had they not, gone out there, or would have been much more difficult to do, particularly in such a short time period. And time is, one of the most valuable currencies for, indie, I think, studios, or any startup, in general, right? That whole runway, getting that first, publishing check, is huge. And so, had they not gotten, I think, the support from, the accelerator, or the opportunity to get out there, that would have been, a huge miss on their front. And so I think there's a huge hole for in the market for, other shows. Obviously, GDEX, in general, sits in such a cool spot. I mean, Columbus, Ohio, it's still a big city. You can get to it. It's got amazing international flights, but cost of living still low. The cost of attending GDEX is still low, and I think making sure it's worth the trip out, and that they can do real business at GDEX is something you've been working on for years. But how many people did we meet that are working on smaller shows like all around the world, trying to do the same thing for folks in their communities? We met the guys down in Mexico that were starting their new show in Mexico City, the Gamicom down there.
Mm-hmm.
I know folks over in Europe are working on smaller shows too. So I think there might be a future where there's just a whole bunch of regional shows that we may go to. It's going to be interesting to see where things end up.
Yeah, totally. I would love to get GDEX to the point. I feel like for me, 8 to 10,000 people is like the max I would want to get, and we would kind of try to be selective of those, because we want to be building meaningful connections. And it's cool to go to a place where like you see a bunch of like your game dev heroes and everything. Like that's awesome, but also at the same time, are you going to be able to meet with those people? Like, are you going to be able to go meet with Hideo Kojima? No, you're
Right.
not. So it's cool that they're around and maybe you get to see a talk. But if you're talking about like just doing straight up actual work, then you need to go to a show where you can actually engage and meet people. Um, but that being said, I think there is a lot of opportunity both for GDC and others. And I did hear, who knows how much of this is real words or not, but I did hear several of the sponsors and people we talked to are talking about how they want to find new regional smaller shows to be involved with, because the cost for them. And that's something that Unity says. Unity's been a sponsor and partner of GDEX for a long time. They find a really good value for our money because GDEX pulls in a lot of people, It offers a lot of educational opportunities that Unity can take part in, but also over 80% of our guests don't go to GDC. They're not going to other shows like GDC and PAX and Gamescom. And so we are a market within, the Midwest, that, these other, you're spending, $1 million at GDC, and then you spend $1 million at Gamescom, you spend $1 million at whatever, DICE. You're seeing pretty much the same people again and again and again, because those are
Yep.
the ones that can afford to go. And so, off being able to offer these other companies and these developers a chance to connect at a reasonable price, and that's the wild thing too. Like, we spent, whatever it was, $300 a hotel, like Henry's Hotel. We shared a king bed, right? GDEX, it's $150 for, and you can get a double king out of that, and there's a couch in there with a pull-out sofa. So if you really wanted to, like if you were an indie developer, you could shove 4 or 5 people into a room for $150 a night. You know,
Oh yeah.
you ain't doing
Yep.
that in San Francisco.
I mean, yeah, yeah, 100%. I know, like, yeah, even our guys, staying at the Indie Hostel, at the High San Francisco downtown, it's about like $100 a night, but you're sleeping on bunk beds with like 6 other people in the room. And it
Yeah,
turns out to be a great time. Like, if you're an indie out there and you're trying to make it out to GDC, I kind of do recommend that hostel because it's nothing but a whole bunch of indie developers hanging out for the whole week. But you better hope, nobody in your room snores, for sure. So quality of life. I say this all the time, for, developers, come to Ohio, come to, GDEX, because the quality of life updates for, being a game developer, in Ohio, or the Midwest in general, is just it's just better.
yeah, and we should take a moment. Let's pimp ourselves for a second here. We had 4 of our portfolio companies through the ShawneeXP Sandbox incubator, GDEX system came out. We had one Nomad, which won the Pocket Gamer pitch competition, which was awesome.
Congrats,
Uh,
congrats, Jollyware Studios
yeah, congrats
wish
to
list.
Jollyware. Yeah, check it out. Jollyware. They have a Steam page, Nomad spelled like gnome. Um, and then we had Devin was out there. He had a handful of publisher contacts. Bill Roper's team was out there. And I feel like we as a collective saw a pretty good amount of success. I'm sure there's other publishers or whatever out there that were kind of doing the same, but it seemed like our teams were constantly busy, constantly making meaningful conversations, particularly in a way that they would not have been able to do before the accelerator, both because of the connections that we've made for them and the people we've put them in front of, but also just general skills and things.
Yeah, I mean, totally. It was just kind of wild to sit back and watch these folks. It's I think our job to get them the support they need, right? And it helps get them in the door, it helps get them into the right meetings, into the right parties, right? Into the right rooms. But it's the talent and the indies themselves that take that thing forward, and are able to make such amazing games out of it, and really show off their talent. And I think you and I were just kind of hanging out watching Elijah, and Devin, and Roper and his whole team, like just kind of pitch and come together and see things happening. And it was like really surreal moment, particularly for me. Like I said, I think this is why we do the things that we do, to try and enable the success of these folks. And yeah, it was like I said, my favorite part of GDC, particularly watching Elijah walk around with that golden, very big indie pitch competition, golden bat. So yeah, man, awesome week. And I'm really excited now that we have this model, in place that we've been able to show, works. You don't have to be in San Francisco or New York or Boston anymore, to get your studio off the ground, to meet the right people, to get funding, to get access to mentorship. And it turns out, that might be the worst places to go and try to get something off the ground, just because the cost is too prohibitive, right? Like, changes what kind of games you can make, what kind of studios you can make, who you can hire, and if those people are accessible, to you anywhere, why are you picking the most expensive places in the world to try to get your studio off the ground? Just doesn't make sense. So, it's really been, I think, validating to us, and yeah, wanted to toot our own horn for a second, dude. You do good work,
Absolutely.
Chris.
Well, we're trying. We're trying. I think we have an opportunity during this kind of rough period. I always say, like, our goal is to build long-term sustainable businesses, and I think the whatever you want to call it, the investor class or whatever, they get themselves into trouble because they're trying to make crazy returns real quick. Because a lot of it, I mean, it's the money, right? But a lot of it's also an ego play for them. They can be like, oh, I got you 45% on your money year over year, and that will bring them new business and whatever. But the reality is like these investors, and in some cases, many cases, the publishers, they don't know what they're doing. Like I've said this before on the show, but like professional investors, over 80% of them, it's like 80 to 85% of them fail to beat the S&P 500, which means you could have just put your money in an index fund and walked away and you would have been better off. And the thing that sucks about that is not only did you fail to beat the S&P 500, so you didn't get the return that you could have gotten, but you're also paying these people a fee to do it. So you're paying them a fee for the honor of making less money. And so I think, again, like the Warren Buffett, we talked about this over drinks many times, but Warren Buffett, he invests in 1 to 2 businesses a year, and he focuses on businesses that he understands that deliver a consistent product at a good value over the long run. And I think that there's a lot of folks right now in the tech space that are just, for whatever 20, 30, 40 years, have been seeing these insane growths through the various products. Even though I would argue many of these products don't actually deliver any value. Like, I'm not convinced that Twitter and Facebook and whatnot are delivering any real world value. Maybe they're making money, but they ain't delivering value.
Yeah. Yeah. There might be a net negative on value as far as
Totally.
the culture
So
is concerned. But
what we are trying to do is to help people be successful, and then they can hopefully build a business that will last them for 10 or 20 years or whatever. So, all right, let's talk about the other fun thing in the room, unless you have any last GDC thoughts. Nope. So we are going to talk about this DLSS 5 thing right here. So let me do a little showcase. For those who haven't seen it, I'm just going to go ahead and play the video. You can find this on the interwebs. So this is the all right, hold on a second. Let me turn this music off here. So they are doing a announcement trailer of what the games look like before DLSS and then after the DLSS 5. And that has stirred a lot of controversy, particularly in the Digital Foundry world, which I watch a lot of their videos. And it's really interesting because I see a lot of both sides here. So I think one is that it obviously, I think, enhances the visuals in many ways, in terms of like textures and whatnot. Starfield, I really noticed, like, Starfield seems like a very flat game, and then when DLS pulls it out, it adds some contrast, which I personally prefer contrast to not contrast. I prefer a more saturated look, I guess. But there's a couple of things here. One is that if you're looking at all of this, go ahead and turn this off. Outside of Resident Evil, I feel like most of the games that they showed very, very, very much look like generic AI image creation. And I'm not a big fan of that. Even within Resident Evil, there's a couple of things that could be pointed out. I do find it as a tech thing pretty amazing because they said that they're not changing, that the DLSS is not changing any of the geometry. It's just enhancing lighting and textures, which is pretty wild if that's the case. But what are your first initial thoughts on this, Garrett?
Well, I thought the older versions of DLSS is we can improve performance. We can basically just use AI to upscale these kind of lower resolution images and make your games look better and get more performance. And I think everybody was on obviously board for that, right? But in the previous versions, it didn't change the game so much. And I think this announcement it's happening at a time where there's all this broader kind of AI backlash, right? Like how many stories do we see about layoffs that are happening in the industry, not just the games industry, but all around, billionaires out on TV saying all white collar jobs are going to be gone in 5 years, and then you kind of drop this new, AI tech right into games as well. Whenever the industry's having this whole um, kind of fight around AI and should we be using it at all? Is it a tool? Is it going to completely replace things? And I think the players themselves are pretty anti AI from what we've seen thus far, particularly when it comes to generative AI, particularly for art. Right? I'm not sure if anybody is super angry about the coding portion of it yet, but yeah, I mean, I think people are worried that it's actually changing the art and not just the resolution. If I had to like boil that down into one bit, and it also is like it's kind of this like uncanny like AI face problem with some of the DLSS 5 stuff. I watched Starfield. I think like looked pretty good, but yeah, there's some other ones where it just feels like it kind of overwrites like some of the game characters. They were talking about like AI beauty standards. It's like changing like the art, right?
Yeah,
It feels like it's changing some actual creative and artistic direction that the game went in. And so I think it all just kind of comes back to kind of fear of losing some artistic control.
yeah. I think you've
So
hit
I
on a
guess that's my
couple.
kind of initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a couple things. The first is NVIDIA, read the fucking room, right? Like we have been talking about for over a year this constant AI thing, and like if I understand they were at, I can't remember the event where they were at, where they were showcasing it. I think it was in London. Um, they want to have it out by fall. If I was NVIDIA, I would have been like, let's maybe mention this in summer, right?
Yeah,
Let's give some of this AI stuff time to die down, because yeah, it was the AI. Even so my mentor, one of the mentor cafes that I did, they asked everybody to like write down on this app, to write down the top issues that they like, the top 4 issues they were concerned about, and then you had to pick 2 or whatever. It was funny, even though AI was not anyone's like top issue per se, it became the number one issue just by the number of people that had it listed. And so as soon as AI popped to the top, everyone was just like, "Oh God, I'm so sick of talking about AI." It was the incubator session that you and I were in, and it's one of those things where it's like, to your point, and this is my larger thing. So, like I said, I think the Resident Evil one looked pretty good. I actually really like the way the Resident Evil, the non-character, like the textures and fabrics and like the street stuff, I thought looked really
right.
nice. But you're right, most of the quote unquote AI, or all the anti-aliasing stuff and the DLSS, like all that, was designed to find a way to showcase games at a higher resolution while still maintaining or ideally improving the frame rate. It's always a balance
Mhm.
between those two. But most of those things, whether it was like checkerboarding or upscaling or whatever, it wasn't making visual. This sounds weird, right? It wasn't making sort of aesthetic decisions. Like obviously, it was making aesthetic decisions, right? But it wasn't
Right.
making aesthetic decisions in terms of like how a character looked. It was just trying to make them look sharper and cleaner and better at a higher resolution. These images are making they are making choices, design art
Yeah.
choices that are not within what the designers and developers intended. So at what point are are we going to take a Christopher Nolan movie through this and like have it do that. Like, could you imagine the uprising that would occur if we're just
Right.
like, oh, we're gonna throw, I don't know, we're gonna throw the birds or Vertigo into this and let it do its thing, and then all of a sudden we've got Jimmy Stewart with some weird plastic face running around, right?
Yeah.
And it is wild because I think they all do suffer from that AI. It's not really an uncanny valley thing. It's just it has this like smooth skin look to it where I would put Last of Us Part 2 against any of those games and any day and prefer looking at Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah. I mean, I think it went from like, DLSS like makes games runs better, like makes games run better to like DLSS 5 AI is going to help decide what games look like, and particularly Nvidia is going to decide like what games look like. And I think that's, at least from the messaging when they come out and talk about it. And again, I think this is like a big kind of messaging issue in general from
Well, I mean, they had
Nvidia,
to have been
but
aware of this, right? Do you think they were just so high on their own supply that they're like, people are going to look at this and be blown away? Because as a tech, it is the fact that it's not changing geometry or adding textures is pretty insane.
yeah,
So as tech,
right.
I'll give them that. It's pretty cool, but like they had to be aware that there was some pushback coming, right?
Yeah, you would think, but I mean, again, they're also, they also have to go and justify like $1 trillion worth of data center build out, in the next like 5 years, and for all this massive amount of investment they're taking on at the same time. So you have to be able to like kind of balance those two. So these need to be transformational products that absolutely change what the economy and all how these different industries function, or everybody wrote bad checks, right? So I think they have to come out with a certain amount of bluster. I mean, I would say that like you should have came out and said devs are going to have absolute like tight control over this thing. And then we know that some of the purists will hate it, kind of like when CGI and motion smoothing first got into the film industry. But I would also have come out and said, hey players, there's going to be a built-in off switch, so if you don't want this, like you can just turn it off. But I didn't hear any of that from their messaging, and I think that would have like probably taken off some of the heat that they're getting
Mm-hmm.
from this thing.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that the what we saw in that video and what was displayed at the event was on a PC running two NVIDIA 5090s to do it. So one was running like the base game, and the second was running the AI upscaling. Now they've claimed that they're going to try to get this to run on one, and I think they already have it running on one, but they're still working on it. So there's a ton of computational power that is needed to even achieve these results that will initially be outside of the realm for most PC players anyway. But it's still important, and yeah, I really share your concern. Like art is such a big important part of the video game industry, and the aesthetics you choose and the design that you choose and all of it is a big part of what makes that game a game. And like I know there's sometimes you'll hear like youngins talk about how old games look really ugly. And I agree, particularly in the early 3D era, a lot of those games looked rough. But Nintendo games, Super Nintendo games, like those 16-bit, 32-bit games, like some of the pixel games. I was
Right.
just watching a thing on Symphony of the Night, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That game still looks, from a pixel perspective, astounding. And
Oh yeah.
if we implement something like this, is it just going to make every game kind of look the same? And like I don't
Right.
want to live in that world. Like I want designers and developers to be able to throw their own artistic touch into it.
Yeah. I mean, even, I mean, sometimes we like, I don't know if you ever do this, but, whenever I look at the games trailer or whatever, having worked in like the engines for so long, I'm like, is this a Unity game or is this an Unreal game? You can kind of tell with the different technologies that are in those engines that sometimes, like you can tell with the lighting, or, maybe how certain textures look. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's Unity, or okay, that's Unreal. It would, I think, take away from a lot of what makes games great if all of a sudden, everybody's using, tech from one major or two major graphics cards, um, uh, developers that forces everything to have a certain type of look to it. So making sure that it's can be turned off. That I think developers have like very tight control over it,
Hmm.
and like the power is in the hands of the creators is kind of my main two um,
Yeah,
wishes/issues with DLSS 5.
totally. Sir Chad Leoc in the chat mentions that maybe this could be used in something like a sports game that has hundreds or thousands of athletes that are based on real people. Like that, I could see making a lot of sense where you're trying to mimic someone's actual real world features in a way.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, again, I think I was blown away by the Resident Evil one, where I was just like, oh wow, that's a really like impressive kind of upscaling, though it does change the way that she looks. Like she looks like a different person. Um, and then like I'm not nitpicky. People are kind of nitpicking, like, oh, the hair. It now looks like she dyed her hair blonde, and she's got like darker roots. I was just like that kind of stuff. I'm less interested in, just because you and I, we come from a video game era where like half the shit was made up in our minds, right? Because the
Yep.
graphics just weren't capable of illustrating any of this. So we just kind of like made
Yep.
stuff up. We filled in the gaps with our brains, right? But
Uh-huh.
but yeah, it's I think a further leap towards this concern. And everyone's, I've seen the AI slop. I don't know if this is particular slop, but it definitely, as a creative, as an artist, as someone who's in the industry, it does worry me that it's just another step towards cutting out people. My ultimate thing, well, I have many ultimate things, but one of them is that people tend to forget that products, particularly creative products, artistic products, it's just as much about the process of creation as it is about the final product. Like you get to the
Right.
final product through this journey as a creative, through this, being an artist. It's not just about getting to the end quicker and having a product to sell. And my worry is this constant push to decrease times, to fire developers, is just like, let's get the product out quicker, quicker, quicker. But you guys, it's not the same product. If you do that, you're not creating the product. And what people connect to over the long term, over decades, the art that people come back to, the music, the movies, are the ones in which passionate people had something to say that connected with the human experience. And then those, whether it was an audience or players or whatever, those people, it meant something to them. It gave them something that they could connect to. If you're just creating a bunch of bullcrap games, like, yeah, you're going to be able to shovel them out and you'll probably be able to make quite a bit of money. But I think it's going to be because so many people be churning through games looking for something that actually has meaning and value. So it'll be like shovelware to the extreme, at a AAA level.
My only like maybe positive take when it comes to AI, if I was going to like straw man this argument, is that I think we've seen, particularly over the last like 15 years, the cost of game development skyrocket, and I think that has a lot to do with where they're built in general. But you kind of see, particularly at the AAA level, games take less risk, and they have to take less risk because they need to generate a return. If your games is cost $600 million to make, that's a huge risk when it comes to the folks that are giving you those dollars, and they want to see return. So you've got to be um you know a bit more careful on what you do, and of course you're going to lean towards things that works, which is why we see some amazing games come out of the indie variety. And my kind of strawman argument for AI is, does it allow smaller teams of creators to make amazing experiences for us that don't require these massive amounts of capital to get out?
Hmm.
So like, are there these amazing experiences that are sitting inside folks all over the world somewhere, that AI can help enable them to get it out. And maybe it's not even in game development in general. Like, how much goes into running a studio, Chris, that we talk to our teams about all the time, that is not game development,
Yeah.
right? That could just save time,
Dude, I say
for
this
for these guys.
I say this all the time, but I left healthcare to make video games, me personally, and I spend 95% of my week not making video games. Actually, it's probably even more
Yep.
than that now. I don't think I've got, some people on my stream here. I don't think I've been involved in a game making decision in a year because I've just been focused on keeping us alive and keeping us afloat. And yeah, you're right. Like, the thing is, the games that were shown are all AAA games, right? Your Starfield and Resident Evil 9. If you had a team of 5 people that released that Resident Evil 9 image, people would be blown away that you could create something that
Yeah.
looks like that with a team of 5. Which I think is really good, really powerful opportunity, like you said, to be more efficient in development. But I think that's going to further the DSSL 5, oh my God, DLSS 5 look, right? If it becomes democratized amongst all these small studios will start using it. Every game will start potentially looking that way. Whereas a lot of indie games right now are forced into some pretty cool creative directions, aesthetic
Yeah.
directions, because they don't have a big team and they're not capable of doing that. And that's where you get some
Yep.
really beautiful games. So
Yeah, and cool shit. I mean, a lot of times necessity is the mother of invention, right?
absolutely.
So the fact that there's these like constrained, boxes of, we only have this much time to get out, a certain game, because we only have this amount of runway. They end up coming up with some really cool stuff, just because they're in that time box. And then sometimes all the money in the world with some of the best developers, on your team, does not, a hit game make. I think we've learned that lesson with, Concord and, a few other kind of notable ones, over the last few years, is, just a whole bunch of money and even one of the best, development companies in the world. That doesn't mean you're going to get a good game out of it. So I think there's something about just the process of making games itself, not so much who is making them, that can really lead to cool stuff. And that's my straw man argument, with AI. If I was going to give a positive to it, I hope that, it remains accessible. It doesn't all of a sudden, once everybody starts using it, become $200-300 a month, like, per seat, and all of a sudden now the only people that can afford to use AI are, these huge companies. But if it is going to move forward and change the industry, that it remains accessible, and that it enables, I think, people who maybe couldn't have made these experiences before, make something awesome that we all get to go out and play.
Yeah.
And then it improves the lives of not just gamers, but, like, of the devs too, right? And it allows them to kind of choose where they want to live, how they want to live, and are still able to make cool things that we all get to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Garrett, we've come to the end here. I appreciate you being on, being all sick and whatnot. Is there anything else you want to mention? You want to talk about ShawneeXP, a way for people to get a hold of you, anything like that?
Definitely. You guys can go to ShawneeXP.com. We'll be having some big announcements we're not ready to talk about yet, but some big announcements we'll have later on, in the year. If you're an indie dev, you're gonna want to check out those, and then for our studios, check out Nomad. They have a new demo out. You can go to their Steam page, please, wish list, check out Mole Maiden, which is released, and out on Steam now as well. Yeah, man, just check us out at ShawneeXP.com.
Sweet. Well, this has been episode 98 of the Sandbox.Space weekly podcast. Reminder, we do this every Wednesday, except last Wednesday when we were in GDC, at 10 a.m. Eastern. And then I also post these videos up onto YouTube, so you can check out our Sandbox.Space YouTube channel. We have some exciting GDEX information coming up too here in the near future, so we'll let you know about that. But until then, on behalf of myself, Baby, Pumpkin, everybody in the chat, and our special guest Garrett, thank you for watching, and we will see you next week.